Humble widow gets thrown out of a job interview for taking her baby, but the CEO saw everything and shocked everyone. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The early morning sun cast long shadows through the blinds as Sarah Mitchell carefully adjusted the tiny blue bow tie on her 6-month-old son's collar. Even in the dim light of their small studio apartment, she could see that Ethan's eyes held the same warm chocolate brown as his father's. It had been 11 months since the accident that took David away forever, leaving her to raise their son alone. 11 months of grief, of struggling to make ends meet, of learning to be both mother and father to a child who would never know the man who had been so excited to meet him. "Today's a big day for us, little man," Sarah whispered, her fingers trembling slightly as she smoothed down the second-hand baby suit she'd found at the thrift store. It wasn't perfect. There was a nearly invisible stain on one sleeve, but it was the best she could do. "Mommy has an interview at Westfield Industries. It's a really good job with benefits and everything." Ethan gurgled in response, his tiny hands reaching for her face. Sarah smiled, despite the knot of anxiety in her stomach. The babysitter had called an hour ago with a fever, and Sarah had spent 30 frantic minutes calling everyone she knew, trying to find someone, anyone, who could watch Ethan during her interview. But there was no one. Her parents lived 3 states away, and she'd moved to the city with David just before the accident, leaving her without the support network she desperately needed. She had considered canceling the interview, but the rent was due in a week, and her savings had dwindled to almost nothing. This job as an executive assistant at Westfield Industries was her best hope. The salary was nearly twice what she'd been making at her previous position, and it came with health insurance that would cover Ethan. She couldn't afford to miss this opportunity. "It'll be okay," she told herself as much as Ethan. "You'll be quiet and good during Mommy's interview, won't you? And then we'll get this job and things will start getting better." Sarah packed the diaper bag with military precision. Diapers, wipes, bottles, formula, extra clothes, pacifiers, and Ethan's favorite stuffed elephant that could sometimes work miracles in quieting him. She'd prepared everything the night before, laying out her only interview-appropriate outfit, a navy blue skirt suit that had once fit perfectly, but now hung a little loose on her frame. Grief and single parenthood had whittled away at her, both physically and emotionally. The bus ride downtown was tense. Sarah held Ethan on her lap, his diaper bag and her worn purse crowded beside her. Each stop brought a silent prayer that he wouldn't start crying, that the elderly woman across from them giving disapproving looks wouldn't say anything. Sarah knew what people thought, that she was irresponsible, that she shouldn't be taking a baby to a job interview. But they didn't understand. They couldn't. Westfield Industries occupied a gleaming glass skyscraper in the heart of the business district. Sarah stood at the entrance, looking up at the towering structure, feeling smaller and more insignificant with each passing second. The security guard at the front desk gave her an odd look as she approached. Ethan balanced on her hip. "I have an interview with Human Resources at 9:30, she explained, her voice steadier than she felt. "Sarah Mitchell." The guard checked his computer, then handed her a visitor's badge. "18th floor, he said, his eyes lingering on Ethan. The elevator ride seemed endless. Sarah used the time to whisper to Ethan, pleading with him to be good, to stay quiet, to help Mommy get this job they so desperately needed. When the doors opened on the 18th floor, she stepped into a reception area that screamed corporate success. All sleek lines, modern art, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering spectacular views of the city. The receptionist, a perfectly coiffed woman in her mid-40s, looked up from her computer and did a double-take at the sight of Sarah and Ethan. "Good morning," Sarah said, summoning a confidence she didn't feel. "I'm Sarah Mitchell. I have an interview for the executive assistant position at 9:30. The receptionist, her nameplate read Margaret, frowned slightly. "You brought a baby to your interview?" The way she said it made it sound like Sarah had brought a live grenade into the office. Sarah swallowed hard. My babysitter canceled last minute. I had no other options. He's very well behaved, and I have everything he needs." She patted the diaper bag. "He shouldn't be any trouble." Margaret looked unconvinced, but picked up her phone. "Ms. Reynolds, your 9:30 is here." A pause. "Yes, and she's brought a child with her." Another pause. "I understand. I'll tell her." Hanging up, Margaret gave Sarah a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ms. Reynolds will be with you shortly. Please have a seat." Sarah settled into one of the sleek, uncomfortable chairs in the waiting area, positioning Ethan on her lap. He was wide-eyed, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. "Please be good," she whispered into his downy hair. "Please, Ethan, Mommy needs this job." 5 minutes later, a door opened, and a tall, immaculately dressed woman with a severe blonde bob emerged. Her expression was cool and assessing as she approached. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm Victoria Reynolds, head of Human Resources." She didn't offer to shake hands, her gaze fixed on Ethan. "I see you've brought company." Sarah stood quickly, adjusting Ethan on her hip. "I apologize for the unconventional circumstance. My babysitter canceled due to illness, and despite my best efforts, I couldn't find a replacement on such short notice. I hope it won't be a problem. Ethan is very well behaved, and I have everything I need to keep him comfortable during our interview." Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line. "Ms. Mitchell, Westfield Industries is a Fortune 500 company. We maintain a certain level of professionalism in all our operations, including our hiring process. Bringing a child to a job interview demonstrates a significant lack of judgment and planning on your part." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. "I understand how it looks, but this was truly beyond my control. If you can't arrange proper childcare for an interview," Victoria continued as if Sarah hadn't spoken, "it raises serious concerns about your ability to maintain reliable attendance as an employee. The executive assistant position requires dependability and professionalism at all times." Sarah felt heat rising in her cheeks. "I assure you, I am extremely reliable. This is a one-time emergency situation. Under normal circumstances..." Ethan chose that moment to let out a sharp, startled cry. The sound echoed in the reception area, causing Margaret to look up from her desk with a frown. Sarah quickly reached into the diaper bag for his pacifier, but in her nervousness, she fumbled, and the bag tipped over, spilling its contents across the polished floor. Victoria took a step back as if contaminated by the sight of baby supplies. "I think we've seen enough, Ms. Mitchell. I don't believe you're a good fit for Westfield Industries. Margaret will show you out." "Please," Sarah said, her voice cracking as she scrambled to collect the scattered items with one hand while holding Ethan with the other. "If you would just give me a chance to interview..." "That won't be necessary." Victoria's tone was final. "Best of luck with your job search elsewhere." The receptionist was already standing, clearly eager to escort Sarah out of the office and away from the pristine corporate environment she had contaminated with her presence and her babies. Sarah felt as if the floor was tilting beneath her feet. This job had been her best hope, her chance to get back on her feet after months of struggling. Now, in less than 5 minutes, that hope had been extinguished. As she fumbled to zip the diaper bag with shaking hands, the elevator doors at the far end of the reception area opened. A tall man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit stepped out. He had salt and pepper hair, commanding presence, and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to being in charge. Margaret immediately straightened. "Mr. Westfield, we weren't expecting you back until this afternoon." The man, apparently James Westfield himself, CEO and founder of Westfield Industries, raised an eyebrow. "My meeting ended early." His gaze moved to the scene before him, Victoria standing rigidly, Sarah kneeling on the floor gathering baby supplies, and Ethan beginning to fuss more loudly on the chair where Sarah had momentarily placed him. "What's happening here?" he asked, his deep voice cutting through Ethan's cries. Victoria stepped forward. "Just handling an inappropriate interview situation, Mr. Westfield." Nothing to concern yourself with. We're taking care of it." Mr. Westfield's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at Sarah, who had scooped up Ethan and was trying desperately to quiet him. "And you are?" "Sarah Mitchell, sir," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had an interview scheduled, but there's been a misunderstanding." "She brought an infant to a job interview," Victoria explained, disapproval dripping from every word. "I was just explaining that this demonstrates a lack of professionalism that doesn't align with Westfield's standards." James Westfield's expression was unreadable as he studied Sarah and the now whimpering Ethan. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. "Ms. Reynolds," he finally said, his voice measured, "I'd like to speak with Ms. Mitchell in my office. Immediately." Victoria's carefully composed expression slipped for a moment, revealing surprise. "But sir, the quarterly reports—" "Can wait," he finished firmly. He turned to Sarah. "Please follow me, Ms. Mitchell." Sarah stood frozen, uncertain if she had heard correctly. Victoria looked equally stunned. "Sir," Victoria tried again, "I really don't think—" "Thank you, Victoria, that will be all." The dismissal was polite but left no room for argument. Mr. Westfield was already walking toward a different hallway than the one Victoria had emerged from. After a moment of hesitation, Sarah hurried to follow him, clutching Ethan to her chest, the overstuffed diaper bag banging awkwardly against her hip. She could feel Victoria's and Margaret's eyes boring into her back as she disappeared down the hallway with the CEO of Westfield Industries. What had just happened? And more importantly, what was about to happen? James Westfield's office was every bit as impressive as Sarah had imagined, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. The room was spacious yet tastefully appointed, modern art on the walls, a large mahogany desk, and sleek furnishings that suggested power without being ostentatious. Sarah stood awkwardly just inside the doorway, painfully aware of how out of place she and Ethan were in this environment. "Please sit down," Mr. Westfield said, gesturing to a plush chair across from his desk. He didn't move to sit behind the desk himself, instead taking the chair beside the one he had offered to her. The choice seemed deliberate, removing the physical barrier between them. Sarah carefully lowered herself into the chair, positioning Ethan on her lap. He had settled somewhat, his cries reduced to occasional whimpers. She rummaged in the diaper bag and produced his stuffed elephant, which immediately captured his attention. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Westfield," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I apologize for the disruption. I understand that bringing a baby to an interview is unprofessional, but I truly had no other options today." James Westfield studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful rather than judgmental. Up close, Sarah noticed details she had missed in the reception area, the fine lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, the warmth in his gaze that contradicted his imposing presence. "Tell me, Ms. Mitchell, what happened with your childcare arrangements?" His question was straightforward, without a hint of condescension. Sarah took a deep breath. "My regular babysitter called in sick this morning. She has a fever. I spent over an hour trying to find someone else, but it was too last minute. My parents live out of state, and—" She hesitated, then decided honesty was her only option. "I moved here with my husband less than 2 years ago, and after he passed away last year, I've struggled to build a support network. There was simply no one else I could call." Mr. Westfield's expression shifted subtly at the mention of her husband's death. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said, and something in his tone suggested he truly meant it. "Thank you," Sarah replied, the familiar ache of grief tightening her chest. "It's been challenging. David, my husband, died in a car accident 11 months ago. Ethan was born 3 months later." She hadn't planned to share these details, but something about Mr. Westfield's direct yet compassionate demeanor made the words flow naturally. Mr. Westfield nodded, his eyes briefly moving to Ethan, who was now contentedly gumming his stuffed elephant. "And you're raising him alone?" "Yes." We have some support from my parents financially, but they can't help with day-to-day childcare. I've been getting by with part-time work and freelance projects, but it's not sustainable. That's why this position meant so much to me. It offers stability, benefits, a salary that would allow me to provide properly for Ethan. She stopped, realizing she was rambling. I'm sorry. You didn't ask for my life story. On the contrary, Mr. Westfield said, leaning forward slightly. I find it quite relevant. Tell me, what qualifications do you bring to the executive assistant position? Sarah blinked, surprised by the shift. Was he actually interviewing her? Here, now, with Ethan on her lap? I have 5 years of experience as an executive assistant at Lambert Financial in Boston, she began, slipping into the response she had rehearsed. I managed the calendar and correspondence for 3 senior executives, coordinated international travel arrangements, prepared reports and presentations, and served as the primary point of contact for key clients and partners. She continued outlining her experience and skills, growing more confident as she spoke about her professional capabilities. Throughout her recitation, Mr. Westfield listened attentively, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. It was the most unusual interview setting she could have imagined, but somehow it felt more genuine than any formal interview she'd experienced before. When she finished, Mr. Westfield was quiet for a moment, as if processing everything she had shared. That's quite impressive, he said finally. Your resume mentioned you graduated with honors from Northeastern University? Yes, with a double major in business administration and communications. And you speak French and Spanish? French fluently, Spanish conversationally, Sarah confirmed, surprised that he had apparently reviewed her resume personally. Mr. Westfield nodded, then surprised her with his next question. What do you know about Westfield Industries, Ms. Mitchell? Sarah shifted Ethan to her other knee, grateful that he was being remarkably well-behaved. Westfield Industries is a leader in sustainable building technologies, founded by you 20 years ago. The company has pioneered several breakthrough innovations in energy-efficient materials and smart building systems. Your company motto is Building a Greener Tomorrow, and you've been recognized for your commitment to environmental responsibility and ethical business practices. She paused, then added, I was particularly impressed by your urban renewal initiative, providing affordable green housing in underserved communities. It suggests a company that values social responsibility alongside profit. Something flickered in Mr. Westfield's eyes, approval, perhaps, or interest. Most candidates mention our financial success or market position. Few comment on our community initiatives. Those initiatives speak to the company's values, Sarah said. And in my experience, a company's values determine the kind of environment it creates for its employees. Mr. Westfield nodded slowly. A perceptive observation. He glanced at his watch, then back at Sarah. I have a meeting in 10 minutes, so I'll be direct. Victoria Reynolds is an excellent HR director in many ways, but in this instance, I disagree with her assessment. Sarah held her breath, not daring to hope. Bringing a child to an interview is unconventional, yes, but the circumstances you described represent exactly the kind of challenge working parents face every day. Your solution, showing up prepared with everything your son needs, demonstrates resourcefulness and determination, qualities I value highly. He stood and moved behind his desk, pressing a button on his phone. Margaret, please ask Ms. Reynolds to join us. Releasing the button, he turned back to Sarah. I believe you're well qualified for the position, Ms. Mitchell. However, there's one more person who should have input on this decision. Before Sarah could respond, there was a knock at the door, and Victoria Reynolds entered. Her expression was carefully neutral, but Sarah could sense the tension in her posture. You wanted to see me, Mr. Westfield? Yes, Victoria. I've just had a very enlightening conversation with Ms. Mitchell about her qualifications and experience. His tone was pleasant but firm. I believe she would be an excellent fit for the executive assistant position. Victoria's composure slipped for just a moment, her eyes widening in surprise. Sir, with all due respect, I'm concerned about the judgment demonstrated by bringing a child to a professional interview. Additionally, as a single mother, Ms. Mitchell may face reliability issues. Mr. Westfield held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. Victoria, do you remember when your daughter Sophia had pneumonia 2 years ago? Victoria stiffened. Yes, of course. You worked from home for 2 weeks to care for her. During that time, you managed to coordinate the Thompson merger negotiations and finalize the quarterly reports, all while looking after a sick child. That was different, Victoria said, but her voice lacked conviction. Was it? Mr. Westfield asked mildly. You faced an unexpected family situation and found a way to fulfill your responsibilities despite the challenge. You demonstrated exactly the kind of resourcefulness Ms. Mitchell showed today. Victoria fell silent, her expression conflicted. Mr. Westfield continued, his tone softening slightly. We pride ourselves on being a family-friendly company, Victoria. It's in our mission statement and our policies. Yet Ms. Mitchell was made to feel that her status as a mother disqualified her from consideration, regardless of her impressive qualifications. Sarah sat very still, hardly breathing, Ethan quiet in her arms as if sensing the importance of the moment. Victoria hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. You're right, Mr. Westfield. I reacted based on appearances rather than substance. She turned to Sarah. Ms. Mitchell, I apologize for my hasty judgment. Thank you, Sarah said quietly, still not entirely sure what was happening. Mr. Westfield smiled, the expression transforming his face. Excellent. Now, Victoria, I'd like you to reconsider Ms. Mitchell's application with the attention it deserves. Her resume is impressive, and I believe she could be a valuable addition to our team. Of course, Victoria said, professional mask firmly back in place. I'll conduct a proper interview immediately. Actually, Mr. Westfield said, checking his watch again, I have a better idea. I need to attend the development team meeting, and I could use an extra pair of eyes and ears. Ms. Mitchell, would you be willing to attend as part of your interview process? It would give you insight into our operations and me a chance to see how you observe and process information. Sarah was momentarily speechless. Yes, absolutely, but... She glanced down at Ethan. Victoria can look after your son during the meeting, Mr. Westfield said, as if it were the most natural suggestion in the world. Now it was Victoria's turn to look stunned. Sir, I have the quarterly reviews to... They can wait an hour, Mr. Westfield said firmly. For a moment, Sarah thought Victoria might refuse. But then something in the HR director's expression shifted, a subtle softening around her eyes as she looked at Ethan. Of course, Victoria said, extending her arms. May I? Sarah hesitated, then carefully transferred Ethan to Victoria's arms along with the stuffed elephant. He's usually good with strangers, but if he gets fussy, there's a bottle in the side pocket of the diaper bag and... Ms. Mitchell, Victoria interrupted, a hint of a smile touching her lips as she adjusted Ethan in her arms. I raised 2 children. I believe I can manage for an hour. Right, of course. Sarah felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, hope, lingering anxiety. Mr. Westfield was already moving toward the door. Shall we, Ms. Mitchell? The development team is waiting, and they can be rather impatient when it comes to their innovations. Sarah gathered her purse, leaving the diaper bag with Victoria. As she followed Mr. Westfield out of the office, she glanced back to see Victoria already seated, speaking softly to Ethan, who was watching her with curious eyes. It was such an unexpected sight that Sarah almost stumbled. Don't worry, Mr. Westfield said as they walked down the hallway, his voice low. Victoria may seem intimidating, but she does have a softer side. Few people get to see it. Thank you, Sarah said, the words wholly inadequate for the opportunity he was giving her. I won't let you down. He smiled, and for the first time since David's death, Sarah felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. The development team meeting was already in progress when Mr. Westfield led Sarah into a spacious conference room. Around a large oval table sat 8 people, a mix of men and women in business casual attire, all with tablets or laptops open before them. A holographic display in the center of the table showed a rotating 3D model of what appeared to be a building structure. Conversation ceased immediately as Mr. Westfield entered, all eyes turning to him and then, with obvious curiosity, to Sarah. "Please, continue," Mr. Westfield said, gesturing for the team to carry on as he pulled out a chair for Sarah before taking his own seat at the head of the table. "This is Sarah Mitchell. She'll be observing our meeting today." Sarah nodded politely, acutely aware of the questioning looks. Under normal circumstances, she might have felt intimidated, but after what she'd already been through that morning, sitting in on a meeting seemed almost straightforward by comparison. Still, a part of her mind remained with Ethan, hoping he wasn't giving Victoria too much trouble. A woman in her late 30s with cropped black hair and bright green glasses resumed speaking, gesturing to the holographic model. "As I was saying, the challenge with the Aurora project is balancing the aesthetic vision with the practical energy efficiency requirements. The client wants a primarily glass facade, but that creates significant heat gain issues in the summer months." "What solutions have you proposed?" Mr. Westfield asked, his attention fully on the presentation. "We've suggested electrochromic glass with embedded solar film," the woman replied, manipulating the holographic model to zoom in on a section of the facade. It would allow the glass to darken automatically based on sunlight intensity, reducing heat gain by up to 70%, while still generating clean energy. Sarah observed the interaction, impressed by both the technology and the clear, concise way the team communicated. As the discussion continued, she took mental notes on the project details, the team dynamics, and the key issues being raised. After about 15 minutes, Mr. Westfield turned to her. "Ms. Mitchell, any thoughts or questions so far?" The room fell silent again, all eyes on her. It was clearly a test, and Sarah took a moment to gather her thoughts before speaking. "I'm curious about the cost implications of the electrochromic glass solution," she said, addressing the woman who had been presenting. "Has the team run an ROI analysis comparing the higher upfront costs against long-term energy savings? That might be compelling data for the client, especially if it demonstrates both environmental and financial benefits." The presenter looked surprised, then impressed. "That's exactly what we're working on now," she confirmed. "Preliminary numbers suggest a break-even point at 7 years, with significant savings thereafter." Mr. Westfield nodded, a hint of approval in his expression. "Good question, Ms. Mitchell." The meeting continued with discussions ranging from technical specifications to project timelines. Sarah remained attentive, occasionally asking thoughtful questions or offering observations that demonstrated her quick grasp of the subject matter. Though her background wasn't in architectural design or sustainable technology, her sharp mind and intuitive understanding of business principles allowed her to engage meaningfully with the content. About 40 minutes into the meeting, Sarah noticed Mr. Westfield checking his phone. A flicker of concern crossed his face before he composed himself and returned his attention to the presentation. A few minutes later, her own phone vibrated in her pocket. Discreetly, she checked the screen and saw a text message from an unknown number. "Ethan is getting fussy. Could use some guidance. Victoria." Sarah felt a pang of anxiety. She glanced at Mr. Westfield, who gave her a subtle nod, apparently having received the same message. "Let's take a 10-minute break," he announced to the room. "Marcus, why don't you prepare the cost projections for when we return?" As the team dispersed, Mr. Westfield approached Sarah. "It seems your son is requesting your presence," he said with a faint smile. "Shall we check on him?" "Thank you," Sarah said, relief evident in her voice. "I appreciate your understanding." They walked briskly back to Mr. Westfield's office, where they found Victoria pacing slowly, jiggling a crying Ethan in her arms. The HR director looked frazzled, her perfectly styled hair now slightly mussed, her expression a mix of frustration and helplessness. "He was fine until about 5 minutes ago," Victoria explained, carefully transferring the wailing infant to Sarah's arms. "I tried the bottle, but he refused it." Sarah cradled Ethan against her shoulder, patting his back soothingly. "It's okay. He sometimes gets anxious with new people after a while." To her relief, Ethan's cries began to subside almost immediately at her familiar touch and scent. "I should check his diaper," she said, reaching for the bag. "Would you like me to step out?" "No need," Mr. Westfield said, moving toward his desk. "I'll give you some privacy." He turned to Victoria. "How about updating me on those quarterly reviews while Ms. Mitchell tends to her son?" Victoria followed him to the far side of the large office, still looking slightly disheveled and embarrassed by her inability to soothe Ethan. Sarah quickly and efficiently changed Ethan's diaper on a clean blanket she spread on the floor, then gave him his bottle, which he now accepted eagerly. As she cared for her son, she could hear snippets of conversation between Mr. Westfield and Victoria, something about performance metrics and departmental evaluations. Victoria's voice grew increasingly confident as she transitioned back to her professional element. "There," Sarah murmured to Ethan as he finished his bottle. "All better now, huh?" She placed him over her shoulder to burp him, aware that the clock was ticking on the meeting break. To her surprise, Mr. Westfield approached, Victoria a step behind him. "Everything sorted?" he asked. "Yes, thank you," Sarah replied. "He just needed a change in his bottle." "Excellent." Mr. Westfield checked his watch. "The meeting will be resuming shortly. Victoria has offered to look after Ethan again, if that's acceptable to you." Sarah glanced at Victoria, who had regained her composure and professional demeanor. "I'd be happy to," the HR director said, though a hint of uncertainty lingered in her eyes. "Perhaps with some guidance this time?" Sarah smiled, appreciating the woman's honesty. "He's usually content after eating. If you hold him upright for a few minutes to prevent gas, then lay him down with his elephant, he might even nap." She demonstrated the position, then carefully transferred Ethan back to Victoria's arms. "Thank you for doing this. It's no problem," Victoria said, adjusting to hold Ethan in the position Sarah had shown. The baby stared up at her with curious eyes, no longer fussing. Mr. Westfield observed the exchange with an unreadable expression. "Shall we return to the meeting, Ms. Mitchell?" As they walked back to the conference room, Sarah couldn't help but ask, "Is this normal? Having the HR director babysit during an interview?" Mr. Westfield chuckled, the sound warm and genuine. "Not exactly standard procedure, no, but I've found that the most valuable employees often come to us through unconventional circumstances." When they re-entered the conference room, the team was already reassembling. The woman with the green glasses, whose name Sarah had learned was Dr. Lydia Chen, the head of sustainable design, approached her immediately. "I was impressed by your questions earlier," she said. "Most observers don't grasp the financial implications so quickly." "Thank you," Sarah replied, pleasantly surprised by the collegial reception. "I find the whole concept fascinating, balancing innovation with practical implementation." As they took their seats, Marcus, a young man with an enthusiastic demeanor, stood to present the cost projections Sarah had inquired about. His detailed analysis confirmed her instinct. The sustainable features would indeed provide significant long-term cost benefits despite the higher initial investment. For the remainder of the meeting, Sarah continued to engage thoughtfully, demonstrating her sharp analytical skills and ability to process complex information quickly. She noticed Mr. Westfield watching her with growing interest, occasionally nodding at her contributions. When the meeting concluded, the team dispersed with several members nodding respectfully to Sarah on their way out. Dr. Chen even paused to shake her hand. "I hope we'll be seeing more of you," she said with a smile. Once the room had cleared except for Mr. Westfield and Sarah, he turned to her with an appraising look. "Well, Ms. Mitchell, you've now experienced a small slice of what we do here. What did you think?" "I'm impressed," Sarah answered honestly. "Not just with the innovative technology, but with how the team collaborates. There's a real sense of shared purpose and respect for different perspectives. And they were equally impressed with you, Mr. Westfield noted, particularly Dr. Chen, who doesn't offer praise lightly. Sarah felt a flush of pride at his words. For the first time in months, she felt valued for her professional abilities, not pitied for her personal circumstances or judged for her responsibilities as a mother. "Thank you for the opportunity," she said. "It was enlightening." "Indeed it was," Mr. Westfield agreed, standing. "Shall we check on your son? And then, if you're amenable, I'd like to continue our discussion about your potential role at Westfield Industries." Sarah's heart leaped, but she kept her expression composed. "I'd like that very much." They found Victoria seated at Mr. Westfield's desk, quietly typing one-handed on her tablet while Ethan slept peacefully in the crook of her other arm. She looked up when they entered, an expression of mild surprise on her face. "He fell asleep after about 5 minutes," she whispered. "I didn't want to disturb him by putting him down." The sight of the formidable HR director cradling her sleeping son with such care brought an unexpected lump to Sarah's throat. "Thank you for looking after him," she said softly. Victoria carefully transferred Ethan to Sarah's arms. The baby stirred slightly but didn't wake, his tiny fingers curled against his cheek. "He's quite sweet when he's not crying," Victoria admitted, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. Mr. Westfield cleared his throat. "Victoria, would you please prepare an offer package for Ms. Mitchell? I believe the executive assistant position we discussed last week would be a perfect fit." Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded. "The one with flexible hours and the remote work option on Fridays?" "Precisely," Mr. Westfield confirmed. "And please include information about our on-site daycare facility." Sarah stared at him, certain she had misheard. "On-site daycare?" "Yes, it's on the 3rd floor," Victoria explained, her professional demeanor fully restored. "Available to all employees at subsidized rates. It's quite an excellent program. Both my children attended when they were younger." I had no idea," Sarah stammered, the implications of such a benefit almost too much to process. Daycare for Ethan would solve so many problems, eliminate so many logistical nightmares. "It's not widely advertised outside the company," Mr. Westfield said. "We find it helps us retain valuable employees who might otherwise leave the workforce during their children's early years. A short-sighted loss of talent that too many companies accept as inevitable." He gestured to the comfortable chairs where they had sat earlier. "Now, shall we discuss the details while Victoria prepares the paperwork? I believe you'll find our offer quite competitive." Sarah carefully sat down, cradling her sleeping son, a sense of unreality washing over her. Just hours ago, she had been nearly escorted out of the building, her hopes for financial stability crumbling around her. Now she was being offered not just a job, but one with benefits that seemed tailored to her specific needs. As Mr. Westfield began outlining the position's responsibilities and compensation, Sarah listened attentively, her mind racing with possibilities. For the first time since David's death, the future didn't look like an endless struggle. There was light ahead, a path forward for her and Ethan, and it had all begun with the worst job interview of her life. 1 month later, Sarah sat at her desk outside Mr. Westfield's office, efficiently prioritizing emails while on a conference call with the Tokyo office. Ethan was downstairs in the company daycare center, where the caregivers had already grown fond of his sunny disposition and infectious giggle. The transition had been smoother than she could have possibly hoped. "Yes, Mr. Tanaka," she said into her headset, "Mr. Westfield is very much looking forward to the presentation on the 15th. I'll send the conference room details and technical requirements by the end of the day." She made a note on her tablet as she listened to the response. "Perfect. Thank you for your time." As she ended the call, Victoria Reynolds emerged from the elevator, a stack of folders in her arms. In the weeks since Sarah had started working at Westfield Industries, she and Victoria had developed a cautiously cordial relationship. The initial awkwardness had gradually given way to professional respect, though Sarah sometimes caught Victoria watching her with an inscrutable expression, as if still trying to reconcile her first impression with the competent assistant Sarah had proven to be. "Good morning, Victoria," Sarah greeted her. "Mr. Westfield is on a call with the legal team, but he should be available in about 15 minutes. "That's fine," Victoria replied, setting the folders on the edge of Sarah's desk. "These are the candidates for the Sustainability Director position. He wanted to review them before the interviews next week." "I'll make sure he sees them," Sarah promised, adding the task to her meticulously organized digital schedule. Victoria lingered, which was unusual. Typically, she delivered what she needed to and moved on efficiently, her time too valuable to spend on small talk. Sarah looked up questioningly. "How is Ethan adjusting to the daycare?" Victoria asked, her tone carefully neutral. Sarah smiled, pleasantly surprised by the inquiry. "Very well, thank you, Ms. Jenkins says he's one of the most sociable babies in the infant room. He seems to enjoy the interaction with other children." "That's good." Victoria nodded, a hint of softness briefly crossing her features. "My daughter Sophia was the same way. Never met a stranger she didn't want to befriend. My son, on the other hand, would cry if anyone but me or his father came near him for the first year." It was the most personal information Victoria had ever volunteered, and Sarah recognized it as the small olive branch it was. "Ethan's generally pretty adaptable, thankfully, though he still has his moments, especially when he's teething like now." "Teething can be brutal," Victoria agreed with a knowing look. "Have you tried frozen washcloths? Sophia used to gnaw on them for hours." "Not yet, but I'll definitely give that a try. Thanks for the tip." Victoria glanced at her watch. "I should get back. The HR team is interviewing candidates for the marketing position this morning." "Of course. Have a good day, Victoria." As the HR director walked away, Sarah felt a small sense of victory. "Baby steps," she thought with a smile at her own pun, then turned her attention back to her work. Mr. Westfield's schedule today was particularly packed, with back-to-back meetings until late afternoon. He had a major presentation to the board the following day, and she still needed to finalize the slides with the updated projections from the finance team. Just as she was diving into the presentation draft, her desk phone rang. "Mr. Westfield's office, this is Sarah speaking." "Sarah, it's Jenny from downstairs." The voice of the daycare director sounded strained. "I'm sorry to bother you, but Ethan has a fever. It came on suddenly in the last hour. He's at 101.3. We've given him infant Tylenol, but according to our policy, he needs to go home." Sarah finished, her heart sinking. Just 1 month into the job and already facing the working parent's perpetual dilemma. Sick child, professional obligations, impossible choices. "I understand. I'll be right down." She glanced at Mr. Westfield's closed door, knowing he was in the middle of an important call. His calendar for the day was critical. The legal team was finalizing contracts for a major project. The board presentation materials needed review, and the quarterly strategy meeting couldn't be rescheduled. And here she was, about to ask for the rest of the day off. So much for making a good impression. Taking a deep breath, Sarah sent a message to Mr. Westfield's tablet, knowing it would appear discreetly during his call. "Ethan is running a fever at daycare. Need to take him home. We'll arrange coverage for remainder of day. So sorry for the inconvenience." Then she began rapidly typing emails to reschedule what could be moved and to hand off urgent tasks to Ashley, the administrative assistant who supported the CFO and sometimes covered for Sarah. She attached the board presentation draft with detailed notes on what still needed completion. Just as she was finishing, Mr. Westfield's door opened. He emerged, looking concerned. "Is Ethan all right?" he asked without preamble. "Just a fever," Sarah assured him, gathering her things. "Probably teething or a minor bug, but daycare policy requires he go home, which I completely understand. I've rescheduled your 2 p.m. with marketing to tomorrow morning, and Ashley can sit in on the legal team wrap-up. The board presentation draft is nearly complete. I've sent you the current version with notes on what's still needed. I'm so sorry about this." Mr. Westfield waved away her apology. "Children get sick, Sarah. It's an unavoidable fact of life." He glanced at his watch. "Do you have someone who can look after Ethan this afternoon?" Sarah hesitated. The truth was she didn't. Her neighbor, who sometimes helped out, was at work, and the babysitter she'd recently found wasn't available on short notice. "I'm working on it," she said, not wanting to admit the full extent of her predicament. "I'll coordinate remotely with Ashley to ensure everything is covered." Mr. Westfield studied her face for a moment, seemingly seeing through her attempt at professional composure. "Take my driver," he said decisively. "He'll get you and Ethan home safely and quickly. Then both of you get some rest. But the board presentation can be finalized remotely if you feel up to it. But your son comes first, Sarah. Always." The gentle firmness in his voice left no room for argument. "We'll manage. That's what teams are for." The knot of anxiety in Sarah's chest loosened slightly. "Thank you. I really appreciate your understanding." 20 minutes later, Sarah was in the back of Mr. Westfield's sleek company car, a fussy Ethan strapped into the car seat the driver had somehow produced upon request. The baby's cheeks were flushed with fever, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by clingy irritability. "It's okay, sweetheart," Sarah murmured, stroking his hot forehead. "We're going home now. Mommy's got you." As the driver navigated through midday traffic, Sarah's mind raced with calculations. Ethan would need to stay home tomorrow too, given the daycare's 24-hour fever-free policy. She could work remotely, but the board presentation. Mr. Westfield needed her there to manage the technical aspects and take notes on the board members' feedback. By the time they reached her apartment building, Sarah had formulated a plan. She'd work from home while Ethan napped, finish the presentation tonight and find someone, anyone, who could watch him for the 3 hours she'd need to be at the office tomorrow morning. The driver helped her up to her apartment, carrying the diaper bag and Ethan's daycare supplies while Sarah held her feverish son. "Thank you so much," she said as he set the bags down in her small living room. "No problem, ma'am. Mr. Westfield said to tell you he'll call to check on the little one later." After the driver left, Sarah gave Ethan another dose of fever reducer and settled him against her chest in the rocking chair, his favorite place when he wasn't feeling well. As she gently rocked, her phone buzzed with an incoming email. One-handed, she checked it, expecting instructions from Mr. Westfield about the presentation. Instead, it was from Victoria Reynolds. "Sarah, I heard about Ethan's fever. If you need assistance with childcare tomorrow for the board presentation, I could step in. My meetings are in the afternoon, and I have experience with feverish babies, as we discussed. Let me know. Victoria." Sarah stared at the message in disbelief. Victoria Reynolds, the same woman who had nearly thrown her out of the building for bringing Ethan to an interview, was now offering to babysit him. The irony was almost too much, but the offer seemed genuine and it would solve her most pressing problem. After a moment's hesitation, Sarah typed a response. "Victoria, thank you for your incredibly kind offer. I was indeed concerned about tomorrow's presentation. If you're certain it wouldn't be an imposition, I would be extremely grateful for your help for a few hours in the morning. Ethan is generally quite easy when he's not feeling well. He mostly wants to be held and to sleep. Sarah." The response came faster than she expected. "It's no imposition. I'll come to your place at 8:30 a.m. Send me your address and any specific instructions and try the frozen washcloth trick. Victoria." As Sarah gazed down at Ethan, who had finally dozed off against her chest, she marveled at how dramatically her life had changed in just 1 month. Not just professionally, but in the support system that was gradually forming around her. People she hadn't even known 5 weeks ago were now stepping up to help her in ways her old colleagues never had. Mr. Westfield called that evening as promised. By then, Ethan's fever had dropped to a more manageable 100.1, and he was sleeping peacefully in his crib. Sarah had made significant progress on the board presentation, working from her small kitchen table. "How is he?" Mr. Westfield asked, genuine concern in his voice. "Better, thank you," Sarah replied. "The fever's coming down and he's sleeping now." "Good, good. And how are you holding up?" The question caught her off guard. Most bosses would have immediately pivoted to work matters. "I'm fine," she said automatically, then added more honestly, "A bit tired, but managing. The presentation is coming along well. I've incorporated the latest financial projections and I'm just polishing the executive summary." "I'm not calling about the presentation, Sarah," Mr. Westfield said gently. "I'm calling because a member of my team has a sick child, and I want to make sure you both have what you need." Sarah felt a rush of gratitude so intense it brought tears to her eyes. "We're okay," she said, her voice slightly husky. "Better than okay, actually. Victoria has offered to watch Ethan during tomorrow's presentation, which was incredibly kind of her." "Victoria?" Mr. Westfield sounded genuinely surprised. "Victoria Reynolds?" "The very same," Sarah confirmed with a small laugh. "It seems I've made some progress with her since that first day." "So it would appear," he agreed, amusement coloring his tone. "Well, that's excellent. But remember, if Ethan takes a turn for the worse, the presentation can wait. We have contingency plans for everything." "I appreciate that truly." After they hung up, Sarah stood in the middle of her small apartment, looking around at the modest space that had felt so bleak just a month ago. Nothing physical had changed. It was still the same cramped studio with second-hand furniture and walls that needed fresh paint. But something fundamental had shifted. The crushing sense of isolation, of being solely responsible for keeping herself and Ethan afloat with no safety net, had begun to ease. For the first time since David's death, Sarah felt like she wasn't completely alone, and that, perhaps, was the most unexpected gift of all. At precisely 8:30 the next morning, there was a knock at Sarah's door. She opened it to find Victoria Reynolds standing in the hallway, looking remarkably different from her usual corporate self. The HR director wore jeans and a casual sweater instead of her typical tailored suit. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail and she carried a large tote bag over one shoulder. "Good morning," Victoria said, stepping inside when Sarah motioned her in. "How's our patient doing today?" "His fever's down to 99.8, Sarah replied, closing the door. "Still a bit fussy, but much better than yesterday. Thank you again for doing this. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it." Victoria waved away the thanks as she set her tote bag down on the small kitchen counter. "I brought a few things that might help. Some frozen teething rings, a gentle fever reducer formulated specifically for teething pain, and a few board books my children loved when they were Ethan's age." Sarah watched in amazement as Victoria unpacked the items, laying them out with the organized efficiency she brought to everything. This was a side of the HR director she never would have imagined existed a month ago. "You didn't have to do all that," Sarah said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness. "I was stopping at the pharmacy anyway," Victoria replied, though her slight smile suggested otherwise. "Now, where is Ethan?" "In his crib, just waking up. I've fed him and changed him, so he should be comfortable for a while. I've written down his schedule and preferences." Sarah handed over a neatly written page of notes. "And I've set up his favorite toys in the living room area." Victoria took the notes and scanned them quickly. "Very thorough. Just what I'd expect from you." She glanced around the small studio apartment, taking in the neatly organized baby items, the workspace at the kitchen table, the few personal touches that made the space feel like home despite its modest size. If she had any thoughts about Sarah's living conditions compared to her own presumably more luxurious home, she kept them to herself. "I should be back by 1 p.m. at the latest," Sarah said, gathering her presentation materials and tucking them into her bag. She was wearing her most professional outfit, a charcoal pencil skirt and cream blouse with a tailored blazer, and had spent extra time on her appearance that morning, wanting to project competence and confidence for the board presentation. "Take whatever time you need," Victoria assured her. "Ethan and I will be fine. Won't we, little man?" she added as Sarah went to the crib and lifted Ethan out. The baby still looked slightly flushed from his lingering fever, but he offered a drowsy smile at the familiar face. Sarah pressed a kiss to her son's forehead. "Mommy has to go to work for a little while, but she'll be back soon. Miss Victoria is going to take good care of you." "Miss Victoria," the HR director repeated with a raised eyebrow, accepting Ethan into her arms. "I don't think anyone has called me Miss Victoria in about 20 years. "Sorry, force of habit from talking to him about his daycare teachers," Sarah apologized, picking up her bag. "He knows who Miss Jenny and Miss Paula are, so—" "It's fine," Victoria said, settling Ethan comfortably against her shoulder. "Actually, it's rather nice. Makes me feel less like the corporate dragon lady." Sarah paused, surprised by the unexpected moment of self-awareness from Victoria. "You're not a dragon lady," she said carefully. "Just very good at your job." Victoria's lips quirked in a half-smile. "Diplomatic as always. Go on, get to the office. You don't want to be late for the board." With a final kiss for Ethan and a grateful smile for Victoria, Sarah headed out, her mind already shifting to the presentation ahead. The drive to Westfield Industries gave her time to review her mental notes and prepare for the technical aspects she'd be managing during Mr. Westfield's presentation. When she arrived at the office, she found Mr. Westfield in the conference room reviewing his speaking points. "Good morning," he greeted her. "How's Ethan today?" "Much better, thank you," Sarah replied, setting up her laptop and connecting it to the presentation system. "His fever is almost gone." "Excellent news. And Victoria is with him now?" "Yes, she arrived right on time." Sarah couldn't help but smile at the memory of the formidable HR director with her tote bag of baby supplies. "She came very prepared." Mr. Westfield nodded thoughtfully. "Victoria is nothing if not thorough." He paused, then added, "You know, she was strongly opposed to your hiring at first." Sarah looked up from her laptop, surprised by the frank admission. "I had gathered that much from our first meeting," she said carefully. "She argued that a single mother with a young child would be unreliable, unable to handle the demands of the position." Mr. Westfield's tone was matter-of-fact, not unkind. "I disagreed, obviously, but I think what's interesting is how completely she's reversed her position. She specifically mentioned in our leadership meeting last week how impressed she's been with your performance." Sarah felt a flush of pride at the unexpected compliment. "That's good to hear. Victoria doesn't change her mind easily or admit when she's been wrong," Mr. Westfield continued. "The fact that she's done both in your case is quite remarkable." Before Sarah could respond, the door opened and members of the board began to file in. The conversation shifted immediately to professional matters as Sarah finished setting up the presentation, and Mr. Westfield greeted each board member by name. The presentation itself went flawlessly. Mr. Westfield was a compelling speaker, and Sarah managed the technical aspects with practiced ease, advancing slides at precisely the right moments and providing supporting data whenever questions arose. The board members were clearly impressed with the quarterly results and the ambitious but achievable goals outlined for the coming year. When the meeting concluded and the board members had left, Mr. Westfield turned to Sarah with a smile. "That went extremely well. Your additions to the executive summary were particularly effective." "Thank you," Sarah replied, gathering her materials. "The visuals on the sustainability metrics really seemed to resonate with the board." "Indeed they did. Marcus in the design team helped with those graphics, didn't he?" "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "He stayed late yesterday to make sure they were perfect. I'll send him a note of thanks." Mr. Westfield nodded approvingly. "You've developed good working relationships across the company in a very short time. That's a valuable skill, Sarah." As they walked back to their offices, Mr. Westfield's phone rang. He checked the screen. "I need to take this. It's the Tokyo team." He answered, switching smoothly to formal business Japanese as he continued down the hallway. Sarah returned to her desk, feeling a sense of accomplishment. The presentation had been a success. Her son was in capable hands, and she had managed to balance her personal and professional responsibilities effectively. It was one good day in what had been an increasingly positive month. She sent a quick text to Victoria. "Presentation went well. How are things with Ethan?" The response came quickly, along with a photo of Ethan smiling, a frozen teething ring clutched in his small hand. "We're doing fine." He enjoyed the frozen teething rings, just as Sophia used to. "Take your time." Sarah smiled at the image, relieved and grateful. She spent the next hour catching up on emails and rescheduling the meetings she had missed the previous afternoon. Just as she was preparing to head home, her desk phone rang. "Sarah, could you come into my office, please?" Mr. Westfield's voice was serious, lacking its usual warmth. A flutter of anxiety stirred in her stomach as she rose and crossed to his door. Had something gone wrong with the board presentation after all? Had she missed something important? Mr. Westfield was standing by the window when she entered, his back to the door, hands clasped behind him as he gazed out at the city skyline. He turned when she closed the door. "Is everything all right, sir?" she asked. "That depends," he replied cryptically. "I've just had a rather interesting conversation with the Tokyo office. They're moving up the timeline on the Nakamura project. They want to begin implementation next month instead of next quarter." Sarah nodded, mentally reviewing what she knew about the project. It was a major sustainable housing development in Tokyo, one of Westfield Industries' most ambitious international ventures. "That's considerably ahead of schedule," she observed. "Does the team think they can accelerate the preparations?" "That's what I need to determine," Mr. Westfield said. "And to do that, I'll need to go to Tokyo. Next week." "Next week," Sarah repeated, already mentally rearranging his calendar, which was densely packed with meetings and commitments. "I'll start making the necessary adjustments to your schedule right away." "Thank you. But there's more." Mr. Westfield moved to his desk and sat down, gesturing for Sarah to take the chair opposite. "The Nakamura team has specifically requested that I bring my excellent assistant who helped coordinate the initial proposal. Apparently, your attention to detail and understanding of the project parameters impressed Mr. Tanaka during your calls." Sarah blinked, processing his words. "They want me to come to Tokyo? With you?" "Yes," Mr. Westfield confirmed. "It would be a 5-day trip leaving Monday morning. I understand this is very short notice, and with Ethan, it might not be possible for you. If that's the case, we can certainly explain to the Tokyo team—" "No," Sarah interrupted, her mind racing. "I mean, I'm sure we can figure something out. This is an important project, and if they specifically requested my presence—" She paused, the practical implications suddenly hitting her. "I would need to find someone to care for Ethan. My parents might be able to come, but they'd need to arrange time off work." Mr. Westfield nodded understandingly. "Take some time to consider the logistics. If it's not feasible, we'll make other arrangements. The company can provide resources to help, perhaps flying your parents here or arranging for a qualified caregiver." "That's very generous," Sarah said, "but I'd feel most comfortable with family watching him for that length of time. Let me make some calls this evening and see what might be possible." "Of course. Let me know what you decide by tomorrow afternoon, if possible, so we can make the necessary arrangements either way." As Sarah left Mr. Westfield's office, her mind was already whirling with possibilities. This was an incredible professional opportunity, a chance to be directly involved in a major international project, to demonstrate her capabilities on a larger stage. But it also presented her biggest childcare challenge yet. Her parents both worked full-time, though they might be able to take vacation days. Her former mother-in-law was another possibility, though their relationship had been strained since David's death. By the time she arrived home, Sarah had mentally worked through half a dozen scenarios, none of them perfect. She opened her apartment door to find Victoria sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, reading a book to Ethan, who was contentedly nestled in her lap. And the little bear said, "But I'm not sleepy." Victoria was reading in an animated voice that Sarah would never have associated with the stern HR director. She looked up as Sarah entered, a faint blush coloring her cheeks at being caught in such an uncharacteristic moment. "Sorry, I'm late," Sarah said, setting down her bag. "The presentation went long, and then Mr. Westfield needed to discuss something unexpected." "It's no problem," Victoria assured her, closing the book and lifting Ethan, who reached eagerly for his mother. "We've had a pleasant morning. His fever is completely gone, though he's still a bit fussy with the teething." "Thank you so much for watching him," Sarah said, taking Ethan and kissing his warm cheek. "It made such a difference, knowing he was in good hands." Victoria gathered her things, looking slightly embarrassed by the gratitude. "It was actually quite enjoyable," she admitted. "It's been years since my children were this age. I'd forgotten how rewarding it can be spending time with a baby. They're so present in the moment, so genuine in their responses." Sarah smiled, touched by the observation. "That's true. There's no pretense with babies, is there? No office politics or hidden agendas?" "Exactly," Victoria agreed, shouldering her tote bag. "Well, I should get back to the office. I have interviews scheduled this afternoon." As she showed Victoria out, Sarah couldn't help but marvel again at the unexpected ways her life had changed. The woman who had nearly ejected her from the building a month ago had spent the morning reading picture books to her son. By Friday morning, Sarah had nearly given up on finding a childcare solution for the Tokyo trip. Her parents couldn't take the week off work on such short notice, and her former mother-in-law had a previously scheduled cruise that couldn't be changed. She'd called every friend and acquaintance who might possibly be able to help, but a 5-day commitment was simply too much to ask of most people. She sat at her desk outside Mr. Westfield's office, preparing to inform him that she wouldn't be able to make the trip after all. The disappointment was like a physical weight in her chest. It was a familiar feeling. Opportunities missed because of her responsibilities as a single parent. Before Westfield Industries, she'd grown accustomed to such disappointments, but this one stung particularly sharply because of how much she'd come to value her role in the company. "You look troubled," Mr. Westfield observed, emerging from his office with a stack of signed contracts. "Is everything all right?" Sarah straightened in her chair, professional mask firmly in place. "Everything's fine. I was actually hoping to speak with you about the Tokyo trip. I've been trying to arrange care for Ethan, but it's proving more challenging than I anticipated. My parents can't take time off work on such short notice, and I may have a solution," Victoria's voice interrupted from the elevator bank. The HR director approached Sarah's desk, her usual brisk stride and impeccable attire restored after the casual appearance of the previous day. "If you're open to it, of course." Sarah looked between Victoria and Mr. Westfield, confused. "A solution?" "Mr. Westfield mentioned your childcare dilemma for the Tokyo trip," Victoria explained, "and it occurred to me that I might be able to help. I have accumulated quite a bit of personal leave time that I rarely use. I could take next week off to care for Ethan while you're away." Sarah stared at Victoria, certain she had misheard. "You want to take a week of vacation time to babysit my son? Is that so hard to believe?" Victoria asked, a hint of defensive stiffness returning to her posture. "Frankly, yes," Sarah admitted with a small laugh of disbelief. "A month ago, you nearly threw me out of the building for bringing him to an interview." The corner of Victoria's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. "A month ago, I had not spent time with Ethan, nor had I witnessed your exceptional work ethic and commitment to this company. Perspectives change, Sarah. Mine certainly has." Mr. Westfield was watching the exchange with quiet interest, his expression revealing nothing. Sarah took a moment to consider Victoria's offer, trying to process the radical shift it represented. "That's incredibly generous of you," she said finally, "but I couldn't possibly ask you to use your vacation time." "You didn't ask, I offered," Victoria pointed out. "And to be perfectly honest, I have over 8 weeks of accumulated leave that HR policy requires me to use some of before the end of the fiscal year. I was planning to take time off soon anyway." Still, Sarah hesitated. Taking care of an 8-month-old for 5 days is a significant commitment. He can be quite demanding, especially now that he's teething. I raised 2 children of my own, Victoria reminded her. I'm well acquainted with the demands of infant care. Besides, Ethan and I got along quite well yesterday, didn't we? There was a hint of genuine fondness in her voice that surprised Sarah. He's a delightful baby. Sarah glanced at Mr. Westfield, who had remained silent during the exchange. He gave her a slight nod, as if to say the decision was entirely hers. If you're certain, Sarah said slowly, then yes, that would be an incredible help. I can't thank you enough. It's settled then, Victoria said with a nod of satisfaction. You'll need to provide detailed instructions, of course, his schedule, dietary preferences, pediatrician information, and so on, and I'll need a key to your apartment. Of course, Sarah agreed, still slightly dazed by this unexpected turn. I'll prepare everything this weekend. Excellent. Victoria checked her watch. I have a meeting in 5 minutes. We can discuss the specifics later. With a nod to both Sarah and Mr. Westfield, she turned and headed back to the elevator. When she was gone, Mr. Westfield chuckled softly. Victoria Reynolds continues to surprise us both, it seems. I never would have expected this, Sarah admitted, shaking her head in wonder. She's not at all who I thought she was that first day. Few people are exactly who they appear to be in a first encounter, Mr. Westfield observed. Victoria has always been exceptionally dedicated to this company and its people, though her methods can sometimes come across as severe. That's one word for it, Sarah agreed with a small smile. Well, it seems I'll be able to accompany you to Tokyo after all. I'll inform the Nakamura team and begin making the necessary arrangements. Perfect. And Sarah? Mr. Westfield's voice softened slightly. Thank you for working so diligently to make this trip possible. I know it's a significant disruption to your routine with Ethan, and I appreciate your commitment. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of activity as Sarah coordinated with the travel department to book flights and accommodations, prepared briefing materials for the Tokyo meetings, and made arrangements for Victoria to have everything she would need for Ethan. By the time she picked him up from daycare that evening, her mind was buzzing with to-do lists and travel preparations. The weekend was equally busy. Sarah spent Saturday morning shopping for necessities for the trip, including a few professional outfits suitable for international business meetings. Her wardrobe had been limited since Ethan's birth, with most of her clothing budget going toward his rapidly growing needs rather than her own. On Sunday afternoon, Victoria came to Sarah's apartment for what she called a handover briefing. Sarah had prepared a detailed document outlining Ethan's schedule, preferences, and needs, along with emergency contacts and medical information. She'd stocked the refrigerator and pantry with Ethan's favorite foods and plenty of easy meals for Victoria. I've written down the pediatrician's number and also my parents' contact information in case of emergency, Sarah explained as Victoria reviewed the documents at the kitchen table. Ethan was napping in his crib, giving them time to go through everything without interruption. Very thorough, Victoria approved, examining the meticulously organized binder Sarah had prepared. Though I would expect nothing less from you. What's this section? She pointed to a tab labeled Comfort Measures. Oh, that's just a list of things that help when he's fussy, Sarah explained, feeling slightly self-conscious. His favorite songs, the specific way he likes to be rocked, which books he prefers at bedtime. It's probably excessive detail. Not at all, Victoria assured her. These are exactly the kinds of things that make a difference in a child's routine. When my son was Ethan's age, he would only fall asleep if I hummed Moon River while walking in a precise figure-8 pattern around his room. Children are creatures of habit. Sarah smiled, relieved that Victoria didn't find her detailed instructions overbearing. Ethan is fortunately a bit more flexible, but he definitely has his preferences. They continued reviewing the care instructions until Ethan woke from his nap. The baby's face lit up with recognition when he saw Victoria, much to Sarah's surprise and relief. "Hello there, young man." Victoria greeted him with unexpected warmth. "Are you ready for our adventure this week?" While Ethan played on his activity mat, the two women finalized the logistics. Victoria would arrive early Monday morning before Sarah needed to leave for the airport. Sarah provided a spare key to the apartment and went through all the baby equipment one more time, demonstrating how the slightly temperamental high chair buckle worked and where to find extra diapers. "I think that covers everything," Sarah said finally, watching as Victoria sat on the floor helping Ethan stack colorful blocks. "I can't thank you enough for doing this. It's so far beyond your responsibilities as HR director." Victoria looked up, her expression surprisingly open. "I'm not doing this as HR director, Sarah. I'm doing it as, well, perhaps as a friend." The word hung in the air between them, unexpected and a bit tentative, but sincere. "I think I'd like that," Sarah said softly. "Being friends, I mean." Victoria nodded, a hint of a smile on her lips as she turned her attention back to Ethan, who was determinedly trying to stuff a block into her hand. After Victoria left, Sarah spent the evening packing and preparing final documents for the trip. As she folded clothes into her suitcase, a photo on her nightstand caught her eye, a picture of her and David, taken during a camping trip the summer before his accident. They were laughing, arms around each other, blissfully unaware of how their future would unfold. Sarah picked up the photo, tracing David's smiling face with her fingertip. "I'm going to Tokyo," she told the image softly. "Can you believe it? Your boring, play-it-safe wife is flying across the world for a business trip." She could almost hear his proud laughter, the way he'd always encouraged her to reach beyond her comfort zone. "I wish you could see Ethan," she continued, her throat tightening. "He has your eyes, your smile, and Victoria Reynolds is going to babysit him for a week, which might be the most unbelievable part of all this." She laughed softly through the tears that had begun to fall. "I think you'd like her once you got past the intimidating exterior. She reminds me a little of your mom, actually, tough but fair." Wiping her eyes, she set the photo back on the nightstand. David wouldn't want her dwelling in grief. He'd want her taking this opportunity, embracing this new chapter of her life. The next morning arrived with the controlled chaos of departure. Sarah woke early to feed Ethan and spend some quiet time with him before the rush began. Victoria arrived precisely at 6:30 a.m., dressed casually again in jeans and a comfortable sweater, a small overnight bag in hand. "The car service will be here at 7, Sarah explained as she finished gathering her things. "Mr. Westfield and I are meeting at the airport." "Everything will be fine here," Victoria assured her, already comfortably holding Ethan, who was babbling happily and playing with her necklace. "We have a full schedule planned, daycare for part of the week, a trip to the Children's Museum, perhaps sometime at the park if the weather permits." Sarah paused in her preparations, touched by Victoria's thoughtfulness. "You don't need to plan special outings. I'm sure you have things you'd rather do with your time off." "Nonsense. What's the point of caring for a child if you don't enjoy the experience?" Victoria's tone was matter of fact, but there was a warmth in her eyes that Sarah was beginning to recognize. Besides, Ethan deserves some fun along with his routine. When the car service texted that the driver had arrived, Sarah felt the familiar pang of separation anxiety that all working mothers know too well. She hugged Ethan tightly, inhaling his sweet baby scent. "Mommy will be back very soon," she whispered, kissing his downy head. "Be good for Miss Victoria, okay? I love you so much." Ethan babbled in response, patting her face with his small hand. "We'll video chat each evening," Victoria promised. "Go, Sarah. This is an important opportunity. Ethan will be perfectly fine." With a final kiss and hug, Sarah picked up her suitcase and briefcase. "Thank you again, Victoria. I'll never be able to repay you for this." "Consider it a rectification of my initial misjudgment," Victoria replied with surprising candor. "Now go catch your plane." As the car pulled away from the apartment building, Sarah felt the conflicting emotions of every working mother, the heartache of leaving her child, mixed with the anticipation of professional fulfillment. But unlike many times before, she wasn't doing it entirely alone. Someone she trusted was caring for her son, ensuring he was safe and loved in her absence. It was, she reflected as the car merged onto the highway toward the airport, perhaps the greatest gift Victoria could have given her, the freedom to embrace this opportunity without the crushing weight of guilt or worry. Tokyo was a revelation. From the moment Sarah stepped off the plane into the gleaming efficiency of Haneda Airport, she felt as though she had entered a different world, one of sleek modernity overlaid with ancient tradition. The 14-hour flight had been spent preparing with Mr. Westfield, reviewing the Nakamura project details and cultural protocols for their meetings. She'd barely had time to register the reality that she was halfway around the world from Ethan. Their driver met them at the airport, bowing respectfully before guiding them to a luxury sedan that whisked them through the sprawling metropolis toward their hotel. Through the window, Sarah glimpsed a dizzying array of neon signs, towering skyscrapers, and the occasional serene temple tucked between modern buildings. "First time in Tokyo?" Mr. Westfield asked, noting her wide-eyed expression. "First time in Asia," Sarah admitted. "Actually, first time outside North America. David and I had planned to travel more, but—" She trailed off, the familiar ache of what might have been momentarily resurfacing. Mr. Westfield nodded, understanding in his eyes. The first international business trip is always memorable. Japan is an excellent introduction. It challenges Western perspectives while remaining approachable. The hotel was a towering structure of glass and steel in the Ginza district. Their rooms were on the 32nd floor, offering breathtaking views of the Tokyo skyline. Sarah's suite was more luxurious than any accommodation she'd ever experienced. Minimalist Japanese design combined with every modern amenity imaginable. After freshening up from the long flight, she met Mr. Westfield in the hotel's executive lounge for a brief strategy session before dinner with their Japanese counterparts. "Mr. Tanaka will be bringing his core team," Mr. Westfield explained as they reviewed profiles of the Nakamura executives. "They'll be evaluating not just our technical capabilities but also our compatibility as partners. The Japanese put great emphasis on relationship building." "I've prepared small gifts for each team member," Sarah said, opening her briefcase to show the carefully wrapped packages. Each contained a high-quality fountain pen with the Westfield logo, accompanied by a handcrafted item from a local artisan in their headquarters city. "I researched appropriate business gifts for Japanese colleagues." Mr. Westfield looked impressed. "Excellent initiative, Sarah. The attention to such cultural details makes a significant difference." The dinner that evening was held in a traditional Japanese restaurant with private tatami rooms. Sarah had practiced sitting properly on floor cushions in preparation and had memorized basic Japanese phrases to show respect for their hosts. Mr. Tanaka, a distinguished man in his early 60s, seemed pleased by her efforts. "Mitchell-san, your Japanese pronunciation is very good," he commented after she greeted him in his language. "Arigatou gozaimasu, Tanaka-san," she replied with a slight bow. "I've only learned the basics, but I hope to improve during our stay." Throughout the elaborate meal of multiple small courses, Sarah maintained the delicate balance of participating in conversation when appropriate while deferring to Mr. Westfield on substantive matters. She noted that the Japanese team observed her carefully, clearly assessing her role and capabilities. When the conversation turned to the technical specifications of the Nakamura project, Sarah surprised even herself by offering valuable insights based on the preparatory work she'd done. Mr. Tanaka nodded thoughtfully at her comments, exchanging an approving glance with Mr. Westfield. By the time the formal dinner concluded 3 hours later, Sarah felt she had passed some unspoken test. The Japanese team seemed to have accepted her as a legitimate business partner rather than merely an assistant. Back at the hotel, exhausted but exhilarated, Sarah called Victoria via video chat. Despite the early hour in Tokyo, it was early evening back home, the perfect time to see Ethan before his bedtime. Victoria answered after 2 rings, the screen showing her sitting in Sarah's living room with Ethan on her lap. The baby's face brightened instantly at the sight of his mother. "Look who it is, Ethan," Victoria said, positioning the phone so he could see better. "It's Mommy!" "Hi, sweet boy," Sarah exclaimed, a lump forming in her throat at the sight of his chubby face and bright eyes. "Mommy misses you so much." Ethan reached for the screen, babbling excitedly. Sarah laughed through sudden tears, both joyful at seeing him and aching at the distance between them. "How is everything?" she asked Victoria, after cooing to Ethan for several minutes. "We're doing very well," Victoria assured her. "Ethan was a perfect gentleman at daycare today, and we had a lovely evening walk in the park before dinner." "And he's eating okay? Sleeping through the night?" "Everything is on schedule," Victoria said with a reassuring smile. "He had all his meals according to your instructions, and he went down for his nap right on time. No need to worry." They chatted for a few more minutes before Ethan began to show signs of sleepiness. "I should start his bedtime routine," Victoria said. "Would you like to sing his lullaby? I can hold the phone while you do." The thoughtfulness of the offer brought fresh tears to Sarah's eyes. "Yes, please." Victoria propped the phone up and prepared Ethan for bed, then held him where Sarah could see him as she sang the simple lullaby she'd created for him as an infant. Despite the thousands of miles between them, it felt like a moment of profound connection. "Good night, my sweet boy," Sarah whispered, as Ethan's eyes grew heavy. "Mommy loves you so much." After Victoria ended the call with promises to update her the next day, Sarah stood at the window of her hotel room looking out at the glittering Tokyo skyline. The city was a riot of lights against the night sky, beautiful and foreign and exciting. For the first time in her adult life, she was having a genuine adventure, one that was entirely separate from her identity as a mother or a widow. The realization was both liberating and slightly guilt-inducing. Was it wrong to be enjoying this professional opportunity when it meant being away from Ethan? The familiar doubt crept in, the constant second-guessing that had become part of her daily existence since David's death. She shook her head, banishing the negative thoughts. Ethan was safe and well cared for. This trip would ultimately benefit both of them by advancing her career. And most importantly, she was still showing up for him in the ways that mattered, maintaining their connection despite the distance. With that resolution firmly in mind, Sarah prepared for bed, setting her alarm for early the next morning. The first official meetings with the Nakamura team would begin at 9 a.m. sharp, and she intended to be thoroughly prepared. The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of meetings, site visits, and formal dinners. The Nakamura project was more complex than Sarah had initially realized. A massive sustainable housing development that would incorporate Westfield Industries' cutting-edge green technology on an unprecedented scale. The Japanese team was brilliant and demanding, challenging every aspect of the implementation plan with polite but incisive questions. Sarah found herself fully engaged in the process, contributing ideas and solutions that drew on her organizational skills and quick thinking. Mr. Westfield increasingly deferred to her on certain aspects of the project, particularly those involving logistics and timeline coordination. "Mitchell-san has excellent understanding of practical implementation," Mr. Tanaka commented during a tea break on the 3rd day. "Very unusual for someone so young." "Sarah has a remarkable ability to see both the forest and the trees," Mr. Westfield replied with evident pride. "She grasps the big picture while managing the crucial details." Each evening, Sarah video chatted with Victoria and Ethan, treasuring the glimpses of her son's life back home. Victoria sent photos throughout the day, Ethan playing at daycare, enjoying his bath, fascinated by the neighbor's cat that had wandered onto their small patio. The HR director seemed to be genuinely enjoying her time with him, going above and beyond mere babysitting duties to provide enriching experiences. "We visited the Children's Museum today," Victoria reported on the third evening. Ethan was particularly entranced by the bubble exhibit. I've uploaded a video to the shared folder. Sarah watched the clip later that night, her son laughing delightedly as Victoria helped him reach for giant soap bubbles floating through the air. The joy on both their faces was unmistakable, and Sarah felt a surge of gratitude for this unexpected bond that had formed between them. On the fourth day of their trip, the Nakamura team organized a special dinner at an exclusive restaurant overlooking Tokyo Bay. It was clear that the meetings had gone well and that this was a celebration of their successful collaboration. During the meal, Mr. Tanaka raised his sake cup in a toast. To Westfield Industries and our partnership, we are most impressed with your company's commitment to excellence, embodied by Westfield-san and Mitchell-san. Sarah felt a flush of pride as she raised her own cup in acknowledgement. She had contributed meaningfully to this project, proving her value beyond the administrative tasks that had initially defined her role. More importantly, she had discovered capabilities within herself that she hadn't known existed. Confidence in high-pressure international negotiations, adaptability in a foreign business culture, innovative problem-solving when challenges arose. After dinner, Mr. Westfield suggested a short walk to enjoy the night view of Tokyo Bay. As they strolled along the waterfront, the glittering skyline reflected in the dark water, he finally addressed what had been implicit throughout the trip. "You've exceeded all expectations on this project, Sarah," he said, his tone thoughtful. "The Nakamura team specifically mentioned your contributions as a key factor in their decision to accelerate the timeline." "Thank you," she replied, genuinely touched by the recognition. "It's been an incredible learning experience." "More than that," Mr. Westfield corrected gently. "You've demonstrated capabilities that go well beyond your current position." He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "I believe it's time to discuss your future at Westfield Industries when we return home." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "My future? I had originally hired you as an executive assistant because that was the open position that matched your previous experience. But it's become increasingly clear that your potential extends much further." He turned to face her directly. "Our Sustainable Development Division is expanding, and they need someone to coordinate international partnerships. Someone with exactly your combination of organizational excellence, interpersonal skills, and quick comprehension of technical concepts." Sarah stared at him, momentarily speechless. "Are you offering me a promotion?" "I'm suggesting a path that would better utilize your talents," Mr. Westfield clarified. "It would involve some travel, though most likely shorter trips than this one, and more responsibility. The compensation would, of course, reflect the increased scope of the role." I don't know what to say," Sarah stammered, her mind racing with the implications. A more senior position, better pay, greater challenges. It was more than she had dared to hope for when she'd first stepped into Westfield Industries with Ethan on her hip. "You don't need to decide immediately," Mr. Westfield assured her. "Think about it during our flight home tomorrow. Discuss it with your family if you wish. But know that the opportunity exists because you've earned it, Sarah." As they walked back to their waiting car, Sarah felt as though the glittering Tokyo skyline somehow reflected the unexpected brightness of her own future, newly illuminated with possibilities she'd thought were lost to her after David's death. That night, during her video call with Victoria and Ethan, she found herself observing her son with fresh eyes. The baby who had once seemed like a limitation to her professional aspirations now appeared as the motivation behind her success, the reason she pushed herself to excel, to create a secure and opportunity-rich future for them both. "Is everything all right?" Victoria asked, noting her contemplative expression. "You seem preoccupied." "Everything's wonderful, actually," Sarah replied with a smile. "I'm just grateful for all of this, for you." Victoria looked momentarily flustered by the sentiment but recovered quickly. "Well, Ethan has been excellent company. Though I will say I've developed a newfound appreciation for working parents. It's quite the balancing act. The ultimate balancing act, Sarah agreed, but worth every challenging moment. As she prepared for their departure the next morning, packing the gifts and souvenirs she'd purchased for Ethan, Sarah realized how profoundly this journey had changed her perspective. She had crossed oceans, literally and figuratively, moving from the desperate, overwhelmed widow of a month ago to a confident professional with expanding horizons. The woman who had been thrown out of a job interview for bringing her baby was now returning home to a promotion, having proven her worth on an international stage. And somehow, improbably, the very person who had initially rejected her had become one of her strongest supporters. Life, Sarah reflected as she took one last look at the Tokyo skyline, had an unexpected way of coming full circle. The 14-hour return flight gave Sarah ample time to consider Mr. Westfield's proposal. She alternated between reviewing notes from their meetings, jotting down ideas for the Nakamura project implementation, and contemplating what this potential promotion would mean for her and Ethan. There would be more responsibilities, potentially more travel, but also greater financial security and professional growth. Beside her, Mr. Westfield was absorbed in his own work, occasionally sharing observations about their Tokyo meetings, but mostly giving her space to process everything that had happened. It wasn't until they were somewhere over the Pacific, with most of the cabin lights dimmed for passengers to sleep, that he addressed the topic directly. "Have you had a chance to think about our conversation?" he asked, setting aside the report he'd been reviewing. Sarah nodded, closing her tablet. "I have, and I'm both honored and excited by the opportunity. I just want to make sure I can balance the demands of the new role with my responsibilities to Ethan." "A reasonable concern," Mr. Westfield acknowledged. "The position would involve some travel, as you've experienced this week, but nothing excessive, perhaps one international trip per quarter and occasional domestic travel. Most of the coordination can be done from our offices." He paused, studying her thoughtfully. "I believe in creating roles that accommodate the whole person, Sarah, not just the professional aspects. Talented people shouldn't have to choose between career advancement and family." "That's refreshingly progressive," Sarah observed. "Not all executives share that perspective." "Perhaps not," he agreed. "But it's not merely idealism, it's good business. The company benefits from retaining skilled employees through different life stages." He smiled slightly. "Having raised 3 children while building Westfield Industries, I'm well aware of the challenges involved in balancing family and career." Sarah hadn't known he had children. Despite working closely with him for the past month, Mr. Westfield rarely mentioned his personal life. "Do your children work in the business as well?" she asked, curious about this glimpse into his private world. A shadow crossed his face, so briefly she might have imagined it. "My eldest son is our Chief Innovation Officer. You've probably met Michael at some point. My daughter chose academia. She's a professor of environmental engineering at MIT. And my youngest..." He hesitated. Robert was more interested in humanitarian work. He passed away 3 years ago while working with a clean water initiative in Sudan. "I'm so sorry," Sarah said softly, understanding all too well the permanent ache of such a loss. "I didn't know." "We don't speak of it often at the company," Mr. Westfield said, his voice steady but with an underlying strain that Sarah recognized. "But perhaps that's why I particularly appreciated your resilience after your own loss. Grief can be paralyzing, yet you've continued to move forward for your son's sake." The conversation shifted to lighter topics after that shared moment of vulnerability, but Sarah sensed a subtle change in their professional relationship, a deeper understanding based on the common experience of profound loss. By the time they landed, Sarah had made her decision. The opportunity was too valuable to decline, and with Mr. Westfield's assurance of flexibility, she believed she could manage the increased demands while still being the mother Ethan needed. As they passed through customs and entered the arrivals area, Sarah scanned the waiting crowd, expecting to see the company driver. Instead, she spotted Victoria standing near the exit, holding Ethan in her arms. The baby was wearing a Tokyo t-shirt that was comically large on his small frame. "Victoria?" Sarah called out, surprised and delighted. "What are you doing here?" "We thought we'd surprise you," Victoria explained as Sarah rushed forward to take Ethan from her arms. The baby squealed with joy, patting his mother's face as if to confirm she was really there. "Oh, I missed you so much," Sarah murmured, covering his cheeks with kisses. He smelled of baby shampoo and the lavender lotion she always used after his bath, familiar and perfect. She looked up at Victoria, blinking back tears of happiness. "Thank you for bringing him." "It seemed appropriate," Victoria said with a small smile. "The company car is waiting outside whenever you're ready." Mr. Westfield approached, smiling at the reunion. "Hello, young man," he greeted Ethan, who regarded him with curious eyes. "Victoria, this was a thoughtful gesture. Thank you for making the arrangements." "It was my pleasure," Victoria replied. "Ethan has been excellent company this week." She turned to Sarah. "We should get him home. He's been remarkably patient, but it's past his usual bedtime." The drive back to Sarah's apartment was filled with Victoria's updates about Ethan's week. His new fascination with the toy xylophone she'd brought him, his growing commando crawling skills, the slightly concerning diaper rash that had appeared but was now clearing up with the prescribed cream. Sarah listened, soaking in these details of her son's life that she'd missed, while simultaneously marveling at Victoria's transformation from intimidating HR director to someone who noticed that Ethan preferred his blue sippy cup to the green one and that he always smiled when the squirrels in the park came near. "You've been amazing with him," Sarah said as the car pulled up to her apartment building. "I don't know how to thank you enough." "It was genuinely my pleasure," Victoria replied, and Sarah believed her. "Though I must admit I'm looking forward to sleeping past 6 a.m. tomorrow." They all laughed as the driver began unloading Sarah's luggage. Mr. Westfield insisted on carrying her suitcase up to her apartment, while Victoria helped with the diaper bag and various baby paraphernalia that seemed to multiply whenever Ethan left the house. In the apartment, Sarah was touched to find everything immaculate. Dishes washed, toys organized, even a vase of fresh flowers on the kitchen counter. On the refrigerator was a new photo of Ethan at the Children's Museum, his face alight with wonder as he reached for bubbles, with Victoria kneeling beside him, looking equally delighted. "Victoria took care of everything," Mr. Westfield observed, setting down the suitcase. "Including adding some personal touches, I see." Victoria actually blushed slightly. "It seemed important that you come home to a pleasant environment after such a long trip." "It's perfect," Sarah assured her, still holding Ethan, who was beginning to rub his eyes sleepily. "And these flowers are beautiful." "Well," Mr. Westfield said, checking his watch, "I should be going. Sarah, take tomorrow to rest and spend time with Ethan. We can discuss the details of your new position on Wednesday." "New position?" Victoria echoed, looking between them with raised eyebrows. "Sarah is being considered for a role in our Sustainable Development Division," Mr. Westfield explained, "coordinating international partnerships, including the Nakamura Project. Her performance in Tokyo was exemplary." Victoria's expression registered surprise, quickly followed by what appeared to be genuine approval. "That's excellent news. Congratulations, Sarah." "Thank you," Sarah replied, still adjusting to the idea herself. "Nothing's official yet, but I'm excited about the possibility." After Mr. Westfield departed, Victoria efficiently gathered her overnight bag and the few personal items she'd brought for her stay. "I've left detailed notes about Ethan's week in your email," she said, "including all the developmental milestones I observed. He's starting to pull himself up on furniture, so you'll want to be vigilant about sharp corners and unstable objects." "You're incredibly thorough," Sarah said, impressed by Victoria's attention to detail even in childcare. "Professional habit," Victoria replied with a wry smile. "Besides, I've always believed that careful observation is key to understanding anyone, regardless of their age. She hesitated, then added, I've also taken the liberty of researching some childcare options that might accommodate your new role's travel requirements. There are services specifically designed for business travelers with children, carefully vetted providers who can step in when parents are away. I've compiled a list of the most reputable ones. Sarah was touched by this thoughtful preparation. That will be incredibly helpful, thank you. Victoria moved to the door but paused before leaving. I want you to know, she said, her voice taking on an unusual note of hesitancy, that I'm genuinely sorry for my initial reaction when you came for the interview with Ethan. It was unprofessional and, more importantly, unkind. Victoria, that's long forgotten, Sarah assured her, surprised by this unexpected apology. Nevertheless, Victoria continued, the experience of caring for Ethan this week has been enlightening. I've always prided myself on my understanding of work-life balance issues in theory, but experiencing the practical challenges firsthand has been humbling. Parenthood has a way of humbling everyone, Sarah said with a smile, but you were wonderful with him. He clearly adores you. As if on cue, Ethan reached out a sleepy hand toward Victoria, babbling something that sounded almost like bye-bye. Victoria's expression softened as she gently caught his tiny fingers in hers. Goodbye, young man, she said formally, though her eyes were warm. It's been a pleasure getting to know you better. To Sarah, she added, call if you need anything, otherwise I'll see you on Wednesday. After Victoria left, Sarah went through Ethan's bedtime routine, savoring every moment of reconnection. As she rocked him to sleep, singing the familiar lullaby that had been transmitted across oceans via video chat throughout the week, she felt a profound sense of completion, as if a circle had been drawn around their small family and was now whole again. Once Ethan was deeply asleep in his crib, Sarah unpacked her suitcase, pulling out the gifts she'd brought him from Japan. A soft plush tanuki, children's books with beautiful illustrations, a traditional wooden puzzle appropriate for when he was a bit older. She arranged them on his dresser for him to discover in the morning. From a side pocket, she removed a small velvet pouch containing a gift for Victoria, a delicate silver bracelet with a cherry blossom charm selected with the help of Mr. Tanaka's assistant after Sarah had mentioned wanting to find something special for the person caring for her son. It seemed insufficient thanks for everything Victoria had done, but Sarah hoped it would convey at least a fraction of her gratitude. As she prepared for bed, her phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Mr. Westfield, with the subject line, Official Offer. Opening it, she found a formal letter outlining the position they had discussed, along with a compensation package that made her breath catch. The salary was nearly double what she currently earned, with additional benefits including a flexible work arrangement, increased childcare subsidies, and a clear path for future advancement. Attached was a personal note. Sarah, I hope you'll accept this offer, which merely formalizes what you've already demonstrated, your exceptional value to Westfield Industries. This position has been shaped with your unique combination of skills in mind and with respect for your responsibilities as a parent. I believe you'll find it both challenging and rewarding. We can discuss any questions when you return to the office. Until then, enjoy your reunion with Ethan. James Westfield. Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the screen in disbelief. Just 5 weeks ago, she had been nearly escorted out of Westfield Industries, judged and dismissed for the very aspect of her life that had ultimately connected her to this opportunity. The irony wasn't lost on her. Crossing to the window, she looked out at the city lights, so different from the Tokyo skyline, yet beautiful in their familiarity. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman she was still getting to know, more confident, more ambitious, more sure of her ability to create the life she wanted for herself and her son. The future that had seemed so bleak after David's death was now opening before her, filled with possibilities she hadn't dared to imagine, and it had all begun with the worst job interview of her life. 2 months after returning from Tokyo, Sarah stood in the doorway of her new apartment, watching the movers bring in the last of her furniture. The sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating a space that still felt surreal to her. 2 bedrooms, an open-concept living and dining area, a small balcony with a view of the city park, and most importantly, enough room for Ethan to crawl and soon walk without bumping into furniture every few feet. "What do you think of your new home, little man?" she asked, shifting Ethan on her hip. He responded by pointing excitedly at a squirrel visible through the balcony door, babbling what might have been an attempt at the word. The transition to her new role at Westfield Industries had been smoother than she'd dared to hope. Mr. Westfield had created a gradual handover of her executive assistant responsibilities, allowing her to acclimate to the demands of coordinating international partnerships while still maintaining a manageable schedule. Her new team in the Sustainable Development Division had welcomed her warmly, especially after learning of her successful navigation of the Nakamura negotiations. The increased salary had made an immediate difference in their lives. Sarah had been able to move them out of the cramped studio apartment into this comfortable 2-bedroom unit in a building with a playground and other families with young children. She'd purchased a reliable used car, replacing the unpredictable bus commute with a straightforward 20-minute drive. And most significantly, she'd established a small but growing savings account, the first true financial security she'd felt since David's death. "Ms. Mitchell, where would you like the bookcase?" One of the movers stood in the doorway, gesturing to the last major piece of furniture. "Against the wall in the living room, please," Sarah directed, pointing to the spot she'd designated. "And then I think we're all set." As the movers positioned the bookcase and prepared to leave, Sarah heard a familiar voice in the hallway. "I brought housewarming essentials," Victoria announced, appearing in the doorway with a large basket. "Wine for you, a plant that supposedly thrives on neglect, and takeout from that Thai place you mentioned liking." "You're a lifesaver," Sarah said with genuine enthusiasm, stepping aside to let Victoria enter. "I was just realizing I have no idea where I packed the dishes." In the weeks since Tokyo, Sarah and Victoria's unexpected friendship had continued to develop. They'd begun meeting occasionally for lunch, and Victoria had even joined Sarah and Ethan for a Saturday outing to the botanical gardens. The formidable HR director was gradually revealing more of the warm, thoughtful person Sarah had glimpsed during Victoria's week of caring for Ethan. "Well, let's see this new palace of yours," Victoria said, setting the basket on the kitchen counter and taking Ethan from Sarah's arms with practiced ease. "Hello there, young man. Have you been supervising the moving process?" Ethan responded with a stream of babble, patting Victoria's face with unmistakable affection. At 10 months old, he was becoming increasingly interactive, developing distinct relationships with the important people in his life. "It's hardly a palace," Sarah laughed, gesturing around the apartment. "But after that studio, it feels enormous." "It's lovely," Victoria pronounced after a brief tour. "Well laid out, good natural light, and that view of the park is wonderful. You've made an excellent choice." They settled on the floor of the living room. The couch had yet to be arranged, and unpacked the Thai food. Victoria had thoughtfully ordered pad Thai for Sarah, and had even brought a small container of the pureed fruits and vegetables that Ethan enjoyed. "You remembered his current favorites," Sarah noted, touched by the consideration. Victoria shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "I pay attention to details. It's part of my job." "Your job doesn't typically involve remembering which foods a colleague's baby prefers," Sarah pointed out with a smile. "Well, Ethan is a special case," Victoria admitted, offering the baby a spoonful of pureed sweet potatoes, which he accepted eagerly. "I've grown rather fond of him." As they ate, they discussed the upcoming European expansion of the Nakamura project. Sarah was scheduled to travel to Berlin in 3 weeks for preliminary meetings with potential partners there. "I've arranged for my mother to come stay with Ethan this time," Sarah explained, "but I've also interviewed 2 of the emergency childcare providers from the list you gave me. They both seem excellent as backups. Responsible planning? Victoria approved. How is your mother feeling about the trip? Excited, actually. She's never been to Berlin either, and she's already talking about taking Ethan to see the Berlin Zoo if the weather is nice. Sarah smiled at the thought of her mother's enthusiasm. The promotion and improved financial situation had eased some of the strain in their relationship, lifting the burden of worry her parents had carried since David's death. "You seem to be adapting well to everything," Victoria observed, her tone thoughtful. "The new position, the travel, the move. It's a lot of change in a very short time." Sarah considered this as she watched Ethan happily mashing sweet potatoes between his fingers. "It is a lot of change," she agreed, "but it feels like positive movement after being stuck in grief and survival mode for so long. Like I'm finally building something again, not just treading water." Victoria nodded, her expression softening with understanding. Grief has its own timeline, but there is something profoundly healing about forward momentum. The personal insight surprised Sarah. "You sound like you speak from experience," she observed gently. Victoria was quiet for a moment, her focus seemingly on wiping Ethan's messy hands with a baby wipe. "My husband died 12 years ago," she finally said, her voice matter-of-fact but with an underlying note of old pain. "Heart attack, completely unexpected. The children were 10 and 8 at the time." "Victoria, I had no idea," Sarah said, genuinely shocked. Despite their growing friendship, Victoria rarely shared details of her personal life. "I'm so sorry." "Thank you, it was difficult. But children have a way of forcing you forward." She gave Ethan a small smile as he grabbed for her fingers. "They need stability, routine, a sense that life continues even when it feels impossible. So you create that for them, and eventually you realize you've also created it for yourself." The revelation cast Victoria in an entirely new light. Her initial judgment of Sarah's situation now seemed less about corporate rigidity and more about a personal trigger, her own history coloring her reaction to a young widow with a baby. "Is that why you reacted so strongly when I brought Ethan to the interview?" Sarah asked, the pieces finally clicking into place. Victoria sighed, looking slightly chagrined. "Partly, though I didn't recognize it at the time. I think I saw you and instantly remembered my own vulnerability after Richard died. The desperation, the fear of not being able to provide for my children. It stirred up feelings I'd rather not acknowledge." "And yet you completely reversed your position," Sarah noted. "What changed?" "James, Mr. Westfield, challenged me to examine my assumptions," Victoria admitted. "And then you proved me wrong with your competence and dedication. I don't mind being proven wrong when it leads to better outcomes." She paused, then added with uncharacteristic hesitation, "And spending time with Ethan reminded me of what truly matters. Corporate policies and professional appearances seem less significant when compared to a child's needs." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the conversation having shifted to a depth neither had anticipated. Ethan broke the mood by offering Victoria a slobbery, sweet potato-covered toy, which she accepted with a laugh. "Thank you, Ethan. Just what I always wanted." The evening continued with lighter conversation as they unpacked some of Sarah's essential kitchen items and arranged the furniture in the living room. By the time Victoria left, the apartment was beginning to feel like home, not just because of the arranged possessions, but because it had been christened with friendship and honest conversation. The following Monday, Sarah arrived at Westfield Industries with a renewed sense of purpose. Her new office in the Sustainable Development Division was still being set up, so she divided her time between there and her former desk outside Mr. Westfield's office, facilitating a smooth transition for her replacement, a capable young man named Derek. "Good morning, Sarah," Mr. Westfield greeted her as he arrived at 8:30, exactly on schedule as always. "How was the move?" "Successful, thank you," she replied, handing him his usual morning coffee. "Ethan seems to approve of the new apartment, especially the proximity to the park." "Excellent. Children need green spaces, he said with the wisdom of an experienced parent. And how are you finding the transition to your new role? Any challenges I should be aware of? Nothing major, Sarah assured him. The team has been very welcoming and I'm getting up to speed on all the ongoing projects. Dr. Chen has been particularly helpful with the technical aspects. Mr. Westfield nodded approvingly. Lydia mentioned you've been asking insightful questions. She's not easily impressed, as you know. The mention of Dr. Chen reminded Sarah of her first real introduction to the company's work during that initial observation of the development team meeting. How differently things might have turned out if Mr. Westfield hadn't intervened that day, if he hadn't seen potential where Victoria had initially seen only problems. "Sir," she said impulsively, "I never properly thanked you for taking a chance on me that first day. Most executives wouldn't have bothered." Mr. Westfield regarded her thoughtfully. "It wasn't charity, Sarah. I recognized capability and determination in a challenging situation. The company needed someone with exactly your qualities." He paused, then added, "Though I confess I didn't anticipate just how valuable you would become to Westfield Industries." The sincere appreciation warmed her. "Nevertheless, it changed the trajectory of my life and Ethan's, so thank you." Later that morning, Sarah met with the Tokyo coordination team to discuss the progress on the Nakamura project. The implementation was proceeding on schedule, with regular video conferences maintaining the relationship Mr. Westfield and Sarah had established during their visit. "Mitchell-san has specifically requested your presence on the next call," reported Marcus, who was managing the day-to-day communications. "He says your understanding of the integration points is crucial to their planning process." "Of course," Sarah agreed, making a note in her calendar. "Let's schedule it for their morning, our evening, to accommodate their team's hours." As the meeting concluded, Dr. Chen approached her with a tablet displaying new specifications for the Berlin project. "I'd value your input on these modifications," she said, her tone collegial. "Your perspective on the practical implementation challenges was helpful with the Tokyo team." Sarah spent the afternoon reviewing the specifications, making notes on potential logistical hurdles and suggesting alternative approaches where appropriate. The work was engaging and challenging in a way her previous roles had never been, stretching her capabilities while building on her organizational strengths. By the time she left to pick up Ethan from daycare, she had compiled a comprehensive analysis that earned an appreciative nod from Dr. Chen and an invitation to join the technical planning committee for the Berlin initiative, a significant vote of confidence in her growing expertise. At the daycare center, she was greeted by Miss Jenny's broad smile. "Ethan had a wonderful day," the caregiver reported as Sarah signed him out. "He's making great progress with his cruising along furniture. I won't be surprised if he's taking independent steps within a month." "He's growing so fast," Sarah marveled, watching as Ethan pulled himself up on a low shelf, beaming with pride at his accomplishment. "I can hardly keep up." "You're doing an amazing job," Miss Jenny assured her, helping gather Ethan's belongings. "He's one of our happiest babies, secure, curious, developing right on schedule. That's a testament to your parenting, especially given everything you've been managing." The validation from an experienced childcare professional meant more to Sarah than any workplace recognition. Despite the professional success she'd achieved, being a good mother to Ethan remained her most important role, the one she worried about and worked hardest at. As they drove to their new home, Ethan babbled happily in his car seat, occasionally producing what sounded like attempts at actual words. Sarah responded as if they were having a real conversation, a habit she'd maintained since his birth. "Yes, we're going to our new home," she told him. "And guess what? This weekend we're going to buy you a little table and chairs for your very own room. How does that sound?" The ability to furnish Ethan's room properly, to create a space that was truly his, was one of the many small joys her new financial stability had brought. The crushing anxiety about basic needs, rent, food, healthcare, had lifted, allowing room for simple pleasures and modest indulgences. Their new apartment welcomed them with late-afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. Sarah set Ethan down on his playmat in the living room, now properly arranged with furniture and the beginnings of decorative touches. The space already felt more like home than the studio apartment ever had, despite their short time there. As she prepared a simple dinner, Sarah's phone chimed with a text message from Victoria. "Dinner with the team this Friday to celebrate the Berlin project kickoff. My treat. Bring Ethan. The restaurant is family-friendly and everyone wants to meet him." The invitation made Sarah smile. 6 weeks ago, the idea of bringing Ethan to a work dinner would have seemed impossible. Now it was offered as a matter of course, his presence not just tolerated but welcomed by her colleagues. 1 year to the day after that fateful first interview, Sarah stood in Westfield Industries' largest conference room, putting the finishing touches on her presentation. The anniversary hadn't escaped her notice. It seemed fitting that today she would be leading the quarterly review of all international sustainability partnerships, presenting to the entire executive team, including Victoria and Mr. Westfield himself. Ethan, now 18 months old and confidently toddling everywhere, was downstairs in the company daycare center, where he'd become a beloved regular. His vocabulary was expanding daily, his personality blossoming into a curious, joyful little person who charmed everyone he encountered. "Everything ready for the big presentation?" Dr. Chen asked, entering the conference room with her tablet in hand. "Just finalizing the last slide," Sarah confirmed, adjusting the graphic that showed the projected 5-year growth of their international initiatives. "The Berlin implementation is exceeding expectations, so I've updated the numbers accordingly." "Impressive work," Dr. Chen noted, reviewing the presentation on her own device. "Particularly the integration model you developed for the Japanese and German teams. Mr. Westfield was specifically praising it in the leadership meeting last week." Sarah felt a flush of pride at the compliment. The past year had been one of tremendous professional growth, with each project building her confidence and expertise. The international coordination role had evolved to include more strategic input, elevating her from merely implementing others' plans to helping shape the company's global approach to sustainable development. "The real test will be the Singapore expansion," Sarah said, referencing their newest initiative. "The regulatory environment there presents some unique challenges." "Which is why you're scheduled to go there next month," Dr. Chen reminded her with a knowing smile. "The team specifically requested you after hearing about your work from their Tokyo counterparts." The executives began filing into the conference room, each greeting Sarah with the easy respect of colleagues who had come to value her contributions. Victoria arrived with the CFO, the two of them deep in conversation about budget allocations for the upcoming fiscal year. "Sarah," Victoria acknowledged with a warm smile, taking a seat near the front of the room. "How's our little adventurer today?" "Proudly showing everyone his new shoes," Sarah replied with a laugh. "Apparently light-up dinosaur sneakers are the height of toddler fashion." "Ah, to have such straightforward fashion priorities," Victoria joked, her formidable professional demeanor softened by the genuine affection that had developed between them. Mr. Westfield was the last to arrive, entering just as the meeting was scheduled to begin. He nodded to Sarah with quiet confidence, a silent signal that he expected nothing less than excellence and that he knew she would deliver. "Good morning, everyone," Sarah began, her voice steady and assured. "Today I'll be presenting a comprehensive overview of our international sustainability partnerships, with particular focus on the measurable impacts of the past year's initiatives and our strategic directions for the coming fiscal year." As she moved through the presentation, Sarah was struck by how natural it felt to be standing there, commanding the attention of the company's top executives. The nervous, desperate widow who had once been nearly escorted from the building had been replaced by a confident professional who not only belonged in this room but was helping to chart the company's future. The presentation was a success, with engaged questions from the executive team and approving nods from Mr. Westfield. When Sarah concluded, the CFO was the first to speak. "These projections are compelling," he noted, referencing the financial impact of their sustainability initiatives, particularly the ROI timeline on the Berlin project. Your team has managed to accelerate the revenue generation without compromising the environmental standards. That was a collaborative achievement, Sarah acknowledged, giving credit to the broader team. Dr. Chen's technical innovations were crucial, and the Berlin team's implementation was exceptional. But your coordination made it possible, Mr. Westfield observed. Don't minimize your role, Sarah. The integration framework you developed has become a model for all our international partnerships. After the meeting adjourned, Victoria lingered as others filed out. Dinner at my place tonight? She suggested. Sophie is home from college and has been asking about you and Ethan, and I've convinced Michael to join us as well. Victoria's children had become part of Sarah and Ethan's extended circle over the past year. Sophie, a vivacious college junior who adored Ethan, often babysat when Sarah had evening work commitments. Michael, more reserved like his mother but equally kind, had recently started law school and appeared less frequently, but had developed a big brother affection for Ethan. We'd love that, Sarah agreed. Should I bring anything? Just yourselves, Victoria assured her. And perhaps that chocolate dessert you brought last time. Sophie hasn't stopped talking about it. Later that afternoon, Sarah left her office early to spend some one-on-one time with Ethan before their dinner plans. As they played in the park near their apartment, Sarah marveled at her son's boundless energy and fearless approach to the toddler playground equipment. "Careful on the slide, sweetie," she called as he scrambled up the steps for the 5th time, his face alight with joy. "Aye, careful, Mama," he assured her, before launching himself down the slide with delighted abandon. A young mother on a nearby bench caught Sarah's eye with a knowing smile. "They're so fearless at that age, aren't they? My Emma is exactly the same." Sarah returned the smile, watching as a little girl approximately Ethan's age climbed determinedly toward the top of the slide. "They keep us on our toes, that's for sure." "I'm Lisa, by the way," the woman offered. "We just moved to the neighborhood last week." "Sarah, and that tornado on the slide is Ethan," Sarah replied, shifting to make room as Lisa moved to join her on the bench. "Welcome to the area. If you're looking for toddler-friendly activities, there's a great music class at the community center on Tuesday mornings." "Oh, that sounds perfect," Lisa said with evident relief. "Everything's still so new, and it's just the two of us, so I've been worried about finding ways for Emma to socialize." Something in her tone, a note of barely concealed anxiety, of trying to hold everything together single-handedly, sparked a flash of recognition in Sarah. "Are you on your own with Emma?" she asked gently. Lisa nodded, her smile faltering slightly. "My husband died in a car accident last year when Emma was just 6 months old. We're managing, but—" She trailed off, the unspoken challenges hanging in the air between them. "I understand," Sarah said, feeling a wave of empathy. "I lost my husband when I was pregnant with Ethan. He never even got to meet his son." Lisa's eyes widened with recognition of a kindred spirit. "It's so hard, isn't it? Trying to be everything they need while barely keeping yourself together." "It is," Sarah agreed. "But it does get better. Not easier, exactly, but more manageable. You build a new life, one step at a time." They watched their children play as Sarah shared some of her journey, the struggles, the small victories, the gradual rebuilding of a life that, while different from what she had planned, had become rich and meaningful in its own way. "I'm actually having dinner tonight with a colleague who became a friend," Sarah told Lisa. "She lost her husband 12 years ago and raised 2 children on her own. They're in college now, thriving. Seeing them gives me hope for Ethan's future." "I can't even imagine Emma as a college student," Lisa admitted. "I'm just trying to make it through each day." "That's exactly where you should be focusing," Sarah assured her. "And listen, why don't you and Emma join us at the music class next Tuesday? I can introduce you to some of the other parents. It helps to build a support network." "I'd like that," Lisa said, visible relief in her expression at this simple act of inclusion. As the children continued to play, Sarah felt a profound sense of coming full circle. Just a year ago, she had been the vulnerable one, desperately trying to create opportunities for herself and Ethan. Now she was stable enough to offer support to someone else on the same difficult journey. That evening at Victoria's elegant townhouse, surrounded by good food and the warm companionship that had become an important part of their lives, Sarah shared the park encounter with Victoria and her children. "I invited her to join us at the music class," she explained, helping Ethan with his pasta. "She reminds me so much of where I was a year ago, that mixture of determination and sheer terror." "A year can change everything," Victoria observed, refilling Sarah's wine glass. "Look how far you've come since then." Sophie, her dark hair and quick smile reminiscent of her mother's, nodded in agreement. "Seriously, Sarah, you're like the company's rising star. Mom says everyone in the executive team talks about your international coordination framework." Victoria shot her daughter a mock stern look. "I do not gossip about executive meetings, thank you very much." "It's not gossip if it's praise," Michael pointed out with the precise logic of a law student. "And it's not exactly a secret that Sarah's been instrumental in expanding the international partnerships." "Enough about work?" Sarah laughed, slightly embarrassed by the attention. "Tell me about your classes, Sophie. How's the environmental science program going?" As the conversation flowed around the table, Sarah felt a deep contentment that went beyond professional accomplishment or financial security. This was what she had truly gained in the past year, not just a career but a community. People who cared about her and Ethan, who had become a kind of chosen family in the absence of biological relatives nearby. After dinner, while Sophie entertained Ethan in the living room and Michael helped clear the table, Victoria drew Sarah out onto the small patio garden that was her pride and joy. The evening was pleasantly cool, the small space fragrant with late-blooming flowers. "I have something for you," Victoria said, retrieving a small gift bag from the patio table. "A little anniversary present." "Anniversary?" Sarah repeated, confused. "1 year since you first came to Westfield Industries," Victoria explained, handing her the bag. "I thought it deserved acknowledgement." Touched by the gesture, Sarah opened the gift to find a beautiful silver frame. Inside was a photograph she hadn't seen before, herself and Ethan at the company holiday party 6 months earlier, both of them laughing at something off-camera, their faces alight with joy. "I thought you might like a visual reminder of how far you've come," Victoria said quietly. "You've built something remarkable, Sarah, both professionally and personally. I'm proud to have played even a small role in your journey." "Small role?" Sarah echoed with a soft laugh. "Victoria, you've been instrumental, from offering to babysit Ethan when I needed to go to Tokyo to including us in your family gatherings. You've given us so much more than professional opportunities." Victoria looked momentarily flustered by the genuine emotion. "Well," she said briskly, though her eyes were warm, "it's been mutually beneficial. Ethan has brought a great deal of joy into my life, and your friendship has been significant to me." Coming from the reserved HR director, this was the equivalent of an effusive declaration of affection. Sarah impulsively hugged her, feeling Victoria's initial stiffness melt into a genuine embrace. "Thank you," Sarah said simply as they drew apart. "For everything." Later that night, after Ethan was tucked into bed in his room decorated with stars and planets, his current obsession, Sarah sat in the comfortable living room of the apartment that truly felt like home. The silver-framed photograph Victoria had given her sat on the coffee table alongside the last photo taken of David before his death. Looking at the two images side by side, her past and her present, Sarah felt not the sharp pain of loss that had once accompanied thoughts of David, but a gentle melancholy mixed with profound gratitude. He would have been proud of the life she'd built for their son, of the resilience she'd discovered within herself. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been countless moments of doubt, of exhaustion, of wondering if she could possibly balance the demands of single parenthood with professional advancement. But looking back on the year since that disastrous first interview, Sarah could see how each challenge had ultimately propelled her forward, helping to create a life that was different from what she had planned, but rich with meaning and possibility. Her phone chimed with a text message from Mr. Westfield. "Excellent presentation today. The Singapore team is eager to work with you next month. Your impact on Westfield Industries continues to grow." Sarah smiled as she typed her response, thanking him for his confidence in her. As she set her phone aside, she reflected on the extraordinary sequence of events that had brought her to this moment. How her lowest point, being judged and dismissed for bringing Ethan to an interview, had ultimately connected her with the very people who would help her rebuild her life. There was a lesson there, she thought, about how seeming failures could become doorways to unexpected opportunities, about how the end of one path might lead to the discovery of another, better one. It was a lesson she hoped to teach Ethan as he grew, that resilience in the face of setbacks might be life's most valuable skill. For now, though, she was simply grateful for the security they had achieved, for the community they had found, and for the future that stretched before them, bright with promise. From humble widow getting thrown out of a job interview to respected professional leading international initiatives, it wasn't the life she had planned, but it had become one she cherished, one day at a time. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen